Hello, everybody. I'm Adam Messer here, and this is a special edition of the Adam Messer Show. I'm coming to you live from Randy Wood Guitars here in Bloomingdale, Georgia, and I am here with Mr. Randy Wood, who is a world-renowned luthier, and he has a new book, and it's called Randy Wood, The Lore of the Luthier. And I just want to read this real quick.
Sure.
Okay, so in the 1960s and 70s, Randy Wood was a forerunner in the vintage instrument industry. Known as the instrument repairman to the stars, the list of Wood's clients read like a Hall of Fame roster, this is pretty cool. This is one of the things I get giddy about with these books and talking to you. Elvis Presley, Eric Clapton, Johnny Cash, Chet Atkins, Emmylou Harris, Billy Gibbons, Bill Monroe, Keith Richards, Roy Acuff, Ricky Skaggs, Hank Williams, just to name a few. In Randy Wood, The Lore of the Luthier, Daniel Wile traces the life and work of a man who quietly influenced the hidden history of bluegrass and country music. And this, we were just talking right before I started recording the show, but I met you in 2014 with the Savannah Morning News. I interviewed you, and we were talking about the new stuff that you had going on with your area here, because you have your music shop.
Right.
You have the instrument shop.
Mm-hmm.
You have the concert hall.
Right.
You have the record store.
Yeah.
And there's a taco restaurant.
Yeah.
So you have.
We try to cover all the bases.
Yeah. And I remember when I first met you, you were talking about this book, and you were talking about getting this book written up, a biography about your travels and all the work that you've done over the years, and I find it fascinating. I really find it fascinating. So, could you share with us like how you got started with being a luthier and how you? I know, and it's all in the book, y'all. So you want to definitely check this out. But I want you to hear from the man himself.
Well, I grew up on a farm, or partially grew up on a farm, and later moved to a small town in the coastal area of Georgia, Brunswick, Georgia. And my dad was a carpenter and a mechanic. He also was a musician of sorts. When he and my mom were dating, I think they met at a square dance. He would go out and play for square dances as a young man. But I got interested, I've been around music all my life, especially church music and stuff, but got interested when I was in the service and taught myself to play a little bit. And after I got out of the service, formed a band down in Brunswick, and I would have problems with my instruments, needing some kind of repair work. There was nobody around to do it, and I figured since it was made out of wood, I should be able to fix whatever it needed, and it just kind of grew from that. So it was I tell people it was a hobby that got out of hand.
Good old American ingenuity.
Yeah, there you go.
Know-how, yeah.
Yeah, but as things needed to be done, I'd try to figure out a logical way to do them, and pretty much taught myself how to work on instruments.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I've always thought it was interesting because over the years that I've come out here, my son Sebastian, that we got him his first guitar at like 13, and it needed some repairs, so we brought it here, and you repaired his first guitar, and he's taken off with it. He
Great.
Loves to play, and
I haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is too, with how it is when you grow up. He's 19 now and got a job, going to school, but I love that you have that sense about you, that you have shared your, not the luthier like knowledge of like, hey, this is what you do like step by step, but what you shared in this book is the whole idea behind like, hey, this is what we did.
Yeah.
This is how we did these things. Like the making the instruments and stuff, that's the things.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the people that you did this journey with.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I was very fortunate in, the old saying, you're at the right place at the right time. But I've always felt you make yourself be at the right place at the right time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's but it all kind of just fell into place.
Yeah.
And so I was fortunate that the bluegrass movement and the folk music movements were starting all about that time. And younger people were getting a lot more interested in music. They had a lot more spendable cash than the earlier generations. So it was a good time to be getting into something new.
Yeah, I can imagine because like my great grandparents were born and grew up in the Depression,
Right.
and then World War I, World War II, and then after World War II, like when you're talking about the '60s and '70s, we were kind of like on like people were all working, people owned houses,
Right.
cars.
Yeah.
I could imagine they had a lot more,
Yeah, they had a lot more free time and a lot more extra cash, so to speak.
Yeah.
So there was a huge boom in the music business in the '60s and '70s. The folk music craze, I guess, was one of the big driving forces of that. And I was caught up into that to some extent. But I've always felt that I was very fortunate to be able to make a living at something that I enjoy doing. Because I still look forward to getting up every morning and going to work. So, and that's something that most people can't say these days.
That's true. And you built this around. I mean, like
Yeah.
you're. I don't want to call it a compound in that way, but like your house. You've got the land right here.
Yeah.
You have what's in walking distance. Of your business.
Right.
Businesses.
Yeah.
I mean, and I love that because I feel like there are a lot of people who they talk about doing it. And they want to do things, and they have like this dream, and sometimes they don't. It's not that they're lazy per se, but sometimes they just don't know how to do it, and sometimes they might get caught up in the idea of like, oh, I really want to, I really want to learn how to play the mandolin.
Yeah. Well, I think just about everybody has dreams of what they want to do, but there's so few that are willing to take a chance and get out and try to do what they really want to do. They're scared to to take a chance and fail, I guess. But everybody has failures in life. You just have to. That's part of living. You have to overcome them. But that's one of the things I've seen. I talk to people every week that say, wish I had done this, wish I had done that. Well, instead of wishing you had done it, you need to go try to do it. And I encourage people to take chances. I mean, go out and walk in front of a car or something, but take chances and experiment on doing something that you've always wanted to do, because life's too short to be having to do something every day that you don't really enjoy.
Amen to that. That is so true. I think that's where a lot of people are stuck too. They have this mental barrier. It's not even so much like the actual doing barrier, like lack of knowledge or whatever. It's just they have a mental barrier, and they're like, oh, I wish I could be a writer, or I wish I could be a musician, or whatever. And it's like, well, if you start playing an instrument, and you stick to it, or you start writing a story and you stick to it, pretty soon you have something that you can say, hey, I've done this thing. And I actually, you just reminded me, like, you're talking about failure, and that I feel like is a huge part of learning how to become successful, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because growing up and maturing is all a process of failures and accomplishments. And unfortunately, a lot of people have more failures than they do accomplishments.
Yeah.
But that's what life's all about. And so we have the best opportunity in the world in the United States, in that we can take chances on stuff on something like that. So I feel very fortunate, number one, to be living in the United States, but also to be living in the period of time that we do. I think we've had more opportunities than any generation before us. I don't know what the generations ahead of us holds, but we've been very fortunate. We've grown a lot in the last 100 years. We've grown more than at any other time since the world began. So I feel very fortunate.
I do too. Like even our talk today, or using the phone with the technology.
Right.
This we couldn't have done this 20 years ago.
No, and growing up, I remember the Dick Tracy comic books, and he would have his wrist radio, which everybody thought that was just unheard of. Nobody ever thought something like that would ever happen. And now, half the people you see have a wrist telephone and radio and TV and everything.
I remember as a kid the Star Trek where they had the little visor, like the computer, the original Star Trek where they'd have it up on the computer, and people were like, "Oh, that'll never happen." And we've got it right on our phones. Yeah, it's like, hey. So, I want to ask you, because this is a story that I remember from when we talked before. But when you did your first mandolin, right? You were creating, like, you were reproducing, like the Fender one, right?
Yeah.
And so
the
like
Gibson mandolin.
The Gibson, I'm sorry. And that was something that because of that situation, you actually changed and started doing the Randy Wood ones, right?
Right.
Can you talk more about that for the folks that?
Well, I had been doing. I didn't start out to actually build instruments. I was more into the repair end of instruments because I'd worked with wood all my life. But when I got the urge to actually build an instrument, I thought about, most people start out building guitars. And my thought process was a little different. I looked around and I figured, if I'm going to do this, I probably need to figure out a way to make a living doing it. And my thinking was that everybody and his brother at that time was building guitars, mainly copies of Martin guitars, which was a company up in Pennsylvania. And I figured you could buy a new Martin at that time for about $200. I didn't feel like I could build a Martin copy guitar for $200. So why would somebody get me to build them a copy of a Martin guitar, which I would have to charge more for, than they could buy a real Martin guitar? So I came up with the idea of starting out building a mandolin, because Gibson at that time was not really building the F-model mandolins, and that was what everybody wanted.
Oh, okay.
So, and there was nobody else that I knew of that was even trying to build an F-model mandolin at that time. After I finished my first one, I ran into a guy named Tom Morgan who had actually built one at about the same time. And that was in the late 60s. Tom and I became very good friends. But it just goes to show that, I knew about, 10 or 15 people that were building guitars. But Tom and I were the only two people building mandolins that we knew about. Later on, we discovered there were some other people around. There was a guy up in New York, I think, was where he was from, and 2 or 3 people out on the West Coast that were doing some of that. But not having cell phones at that time, that was a whole world away.
Oh yeah, you could be you could be in the same state in a different town
Yeah.
and never know.
Oh, yeah.
As a kid, my uncle, my family all moved from Cincinnati to Georgia, and when they all moved down here in the late '70s, it was like that. Like we had long distance calls.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was like maybe once a month, maybe, because it was really expensive back then.
Right.
You couldn't just pick up the phone and say, hey. And I imagine if you were trying to call from Georgia to California, the rates
was
were
almost unheard of. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was fortunate to have had a twin brother, and so comparisons were a lot easier for me to make in a way. Although he and I were completely different, we started life out as equal as anybody could be.
Yeah.
Since we were twins, but when by the time we were 21 years old, I don't know that my brother had ever been out of the state of Georgia.
Oh, wow.
Had never been probably any further than Atlanta in Georgia.
Oh, wow.
And by the time, and I went in the service, so I was in South Carolina and Massachusetts and New Mexico and California and spent 2 years in Hawaii.
And you probably met a lot of people from around the world too.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
How did that open your mind up and change you as a young man? Being in the Army and meeting other people that because you grew up here in Georgia on a farm, and how did that open your mind up to?
Yeah, I didn't think a lot about it. I always kind of looked forward to new adventures.
Mm-hmm.
That to me was one of the exciting things about early life back then was going to new places and meeting new people. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate to have met a lot of good people through during those years. But I don't recall meeting too many in the way of the music business. That was a completely different world.
Right.
That didn't really start until after I got out of the service.
I just think it's a neat thread because you go in the Army, you travel in the Army,
right?
You get out, you start traveling with your music. Mm-hmm. Then as a luthier, you've been all over. You've met people from all over the world.
Right.
And that's it seems like a theme, throughout your life that you've continued on with that. And I think that's one of the reasons why it just seems like from my perspective, that's one of the things that with you that you are open to helping other people, talking to different people from all backgrounds, rich or poor,
and that's something I've always tried to do. I recall an incident early on in my budding career when I was trying to learn to do a lot of this stuff. I was trying to learn how to cut pearl, make pearl inlays and all. Mm-hmm. And there were no books, there was no computer, Facebook, anything like that, YouTube back then. And I'd heard about a guy that lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee at the time that was actually cutting pearl or doing pearl inlay. So I called him and made an appointment to go up and see him. And when we got to his house, he and his mother, and he was living with his mother, he invited us in, and he made a point of coming out of his shop and locking the door behind him as if to say, I'll be glad to talk to you, but I'm not going to show you anything in my shop.
Oh, wow.
And he wouldn't even talk about inlay other than just stuff that he had done.
Oh, okay.
So I left there very irritated that I had not been able to find out anything, because I'd driven 2 or 3 hours to get there and had 2 or 3 hours to drive back. Later on, he and I became very good friends, and I told him about that situation, and he got a big laugh out of it, as we both did. But that made me more determined than ever to to learn how to do pearl inlay.
Oh, okay.
And 10 or 15 years later, we had ran into each other, and I think he had come down to Nashville for the weekend or something. And we got to talking about that and laughing about it. He said, and he admitted that a couple of years before he had decided to retire from doing pearl inlay because my inlay was so much better than his. So
Oh, wow.
Made me feel good, but we got a big kick out of that. But it taught me a valuable lesson about helping other people. So I've always, if I could answer somebody's question or show somebody something, I've always tried to do it because I would a lot rather have friends walking around in competition than I would enemies walking around in competition.
Yeah.
But and it just made me, what he did made me more determined to learn. And so I feel like, you know, if somebody's interested enough to ask you about something like that, you give them all the information you can, but if they don't have the ability, they're not going to be able to use it anyway. And if they do have the ability and they don't learn it from you, they'll learn it from somebody else. So why try to hide information from somebody? You know, it's much easier to help somebody than it is to hinder somebody.
Yeah, that's so true. Just to bring the book back around.
Yeah.
You know, this book is chock full of stories.
Yeah.
And
yeah, Daniel, I think, did a magnificent job with that.
Yeah.
He knows more about me than I do.
I
don't know where he
love it.
found some of that information.
And here, y'all, this is these are some photos. It says by Daniel Wile, but you know, I'll zoom it in later on. But yeah, the book is full of stories,
Yeah.
photos, and you know, just you know, I love the. I mean, look at this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I love this kind of stuff because you know the things are the things. You know, the process or whatever. Just like you just said. Like for example, when I first met you, you were like one of the first celebrities I'd ever interviewed,
Mm-hmm.
and
I don't consider myself a celebrity. I'm a journeyman.
yeah, well,
But-
I mean, like world renowned.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I know that you're very humble, and I don't mean like a celebrity like you know Hollywood, like
Uh-huh.
oh big time. I mean, you were like the first big interview
Mhm.
person that I'd done.
Right.
You know, because I just started writing for the paper in 2014, and I think it was actually about the annual jam. I have to go back and look.
Could have been.
Yeah, but I just always love the because you're a master at your craft. You've worked your lifetime at
Mhm.
doing this thing,
Yeah.
and I love that you just said it's about the people and giving back. And then
Mhm.
you know, it is true. If somebody doesn't want to share their information, you know, like the guy you became the best person in the world doing this inlay pearl inlay. You know, that's what people, you know, recognize
Yeah.
your guitars for. That out of a situation that, you know, the guy kind of, you know,
Mhm.
you laugh about it now, but the guy kind of just, he's like, yeah, come on up, kid, I'll show you something. And then you get up there and he gives you the cold shoulder and,
Yeah.
you know, but it gave you that drive, that
Mhm.
motivation. And I think that's something that we're, not to compare, you know, generations, but like I know my generation, we had it a lot better than your generation. Your
Yeah.
generation had it a lot better than your parents' generation.
Right.
Our kids and so on. And I think today we're so used to, and I say we as a society,
Yeah.
but we're so used to instant information, instant
Yeah.
learning, instant whatever. And that the craftsmanship or the guild or the trade or, you know, people, they don't realize that it took years to learn maybe just one skill.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and the inlay, the pearl inlay, it just seems like a great example of that. Like, you know, you didn't just learn it overnight. You know, I'm sure it took you a while.
Yeah. It took several years.
And then after that, you know, developing your own style. You know, just mastering that.
Yeah.
You know, as you went, and then how many people you've shown since then how to do that. You
Yeah.
know, and we were talking for a minute too about like I'm in a trade. I'm in an apprenticeship for an electrician's apprenticeship, and I'm going into my final year of this, and it's 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, and you had a Luthier apprenticeship program for a long time,
Right.
and we were talking about that with the with teaching that craft and teaching that to the next generation.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting how you said that there are, I don't know, like 70 something school. I think you said 79 schools that are doing it right now.
Yeah.
And
That at last count, and that was 2, 3, 4 years ago.
yeah, you have your shop here. You don't do the apprenticeship anymore, but you still have people that come in and that they work on things in the shop, and
Right.
and I'm sure that you don't, not necessarily a formal apprenticeship, but I'm sure that you're still helping. Like, oh hey, this is something that you could do to. Could you talk a little bit about that?
We still do some of that, and as far as like setups on instruments, things. It's amazing to me how many musicians. We're getting to be a lazy society, I think, but we have numerous musicians, and we're glad to have them, and they're great customers and all that actually come in, bring their instruments in to have us change the strings for them.
Yeah.
Which is it's a mundane job, but it's something that has to be done on a fairly regular basis. But it's amazing to me the number of good musicians that I know that not only do they not want to change the strings on their guitars, which is a very common, it's almost like brushing your teeth of a morning.
Yeah.
But they don't have the ability.
Yeah.
They don't know how to change the strings on their guitar. We show probably several people a week how to change the strings on their instruments.
Wow.
But little minor things like that.
That's maintenance stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's if you're going to be a musician, you have to be able to do some maintenance. Like it's like washing your car. Well, it's even more mundane than washing your car.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people don't wash their own cars. They take them to a car wash.
Right. That's part of that luxury of how our society's
Right,
changed.
yeah.
You grew up on a farm. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I know as a kid, we used stuff over and over again, or
Yeah.
we repurpose it for something, and
Right.
because we just didn't have the money to buy new stuff.
That's right.
We couldn't just be like, hey, I got a hole in my shoe. I'm gonna go get a new pair today. It didn't happen like that.
Right. Yeah.
I think, and to talk about that maintenance stuff, like Sebastian, my son, we were talking a little bit about this too, but he has learned over, studying and doing it himself on how to repair, replace different electronic parts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He taught himself how to solder because he wanted to. He had that want to, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I really feel like that's something that separates people from just being a picker and a player to, not that they're not musicians,
Yeah.
but to really wanting to. I don't know. It's kind of like changing your own oil.
Yeah.
If you change your own oil, you might not have the time. You might take it in the shop, but if you know how to do it, you can do it whenever you want to.
Yeah.
Or if you change a tire in your car, if you not necessarily that you will do it,
Yeah.
but if you know how to do it, at least you have that self-sufficiency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's of course, like I say, we're glad to have the work, and we don't mind changing strings, and there's a lot of general maintenance on a musical instrument, just like there is an automobile or your air conditioner in your house and things like that, and we do a lot of that also. A lot of builders, people that build instruments, don't do any repair work. Simply, a lot of them don't know how. I tell people all the time, and it's has a lot of truth behind it, that any competent repairman can build a musical instrument. There's very few builders that can do competent repair work.
Oh wow. That
So
makes-
there's a big difference in the two, and it's a shame that more people don't get into the repair end of the business. They think it's, some people actually think it's almost beneath them, which kind of aggravates me.
That's where you got your start.
Yeah.
That's where you
I got
started.
my start. And I still enjoy doing repair work.
Yeah.
I do more building now than I do repair work, but I still do a fair amount of repair work, just because I enjoy it.
Mhm. Being able to take something and restore it to life.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's actually one of the things that they talk about in the
Yeah.
book.
Mhm.
All right, so welcome back, everybody. This is the second part of the interview. I'm here today at Randy Wood's place here in Bloomingdale. We're talking about his new book. This is Randy Wood, world-renowned luthier, and you know, one of the things I felt like is so interesting with talking about the book and
Mhm.
you know, talking about these stories is the people that
Yeah.
you know you've met people from the very top of the music industry
Mhm.
all the way to just your average, you know, kid that wants
Yeah.
to come in and start learning how to pick and play. And you know people all over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a concert hall here that you broadcast out to, you know.
Mhm.
I remember when we were talking before, you were talking about like you have a lot of fans in Japan.
Yeah.
You have a lot of fans like in Europe, and all over the place. And what, for you, what's kind of kept that balance where, you know, because you're very humble and very down to earth, you know, and what's kind of kept that balance for you? Like, you know, like some people act like I've arrived, you know.
Yeah.
What's kind of kept you humble and kept you, you know, you treat, you know, the young kid the same
Yeah.
as you treat, you know, the.
Yeah, well, I don't really know how you would answer that. I've been fortunate enough to most of the people that I've met, I know personally, and I've been around them when they weren't in front of the cameras or on stage or whatever, and talk to them about other things besides music. And most of the people in the music business or the entertainment business, they're just they're everyday people, just like you and me. They have a different job to do, and I've learned over the years, and it's a lot of people probably won't even know what I'm talking about, but you have the people who are real stars or real celebrities, and you have the people that think that they're real stars.
Yeah.
And the majority of the time, probably 99% of the time, the real stars, if you get them, or if you run into them or meet them at the grocery store or on the street or whatever, they're just as friendly as they can be. The people that think that they're stars usually are the ones that have their nose in the air and think they're better than everybody else.
Yeah. Those are the folks I try to stay away from.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to explain, but I've run into that so many times, and usually within a couple of minutes of meeting somebody, you can make a judgment on whether they're actually you know, a real star or celebrity or whatever, and so I kind of look for that, and the people that are aggravating or I think they're better than you or anything, I usually try to steer clear of those people.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed, like, I've been to the annual jams, with the exception of, I didn't come, I don't know if you did one this year or not, but I went to the one, I know the last year with the pandemic and all, like, it got
Right.
rearranged or whatever.
Right. We did not have one last year. We did have one this year.
Yeah, I didn't come to this one, but I went to the one before
Yeah.
the pandemic, and I've been to several of them. And I try to make it a point to come out that weekend, and bring the kids and all, because these people come from all over the world.
Yeah.
And they travel here. Some are they got their RVs. Some of them got their they might just have come from the airport.
Yeah.
And they might be staying in a hotel locally or whatever, and they're all just super friendly. Like you can sit in with them, listen, because I'm not a player, but I love to listen to them playing or singing or whatever, and all over like the whole area here. And I think that's a really good reflection of how you are, because you attract the people that that you're like.
Yeah.
And these folks that come out here, they come out here for the same reason I do. I love coming out here. I love, like even when I came out here last week and I saw that you had your new book.
Yeah.
I wasn't really aware that you had your new book, but I know we had talked about it,
Yeah.
and we had talked about, you've been working on it for a long time. And so I was excited, because I was like, hey, I've got this radio show now, which I didn't have when I first met you.
Yeah.
And the newspapers have kind of, slowly gone down.
Yeah.
And so I don't have as much chance to really publish a story, an article like that. But I thought it was cool because, these stories that you have in here that you talk about, these are folks that, like right here, I just turned to one page here. Danny Farrington, I'm sorry, and Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top, the old time pick and parlor, photos courtesy of Danny Farrington. And that's just on a random page.
Yeah.
And it's.
Yeah, Danny was one of my best apprentices. I had several, but in the shop we had in Nashville, we had a regular apprenticeship program. It was a 2-year program. Danny went through that, and then I hired him. He worked as a journeyman repair guy for several years there. But Danny went on. When he left there, he moved to Hollywood, to Los Angeles, and spent a lot of time with all the big rock musicians and what have you out there. And one of his accomplishments, he became real good friends with the Coen brothers, the people that produce a lot of the great movies that we have nowadays. And in one of their movies, that I don't know how well the movie did, I don't track stuff like that, but a movie called The Lady Killers with Tom Hanks, they commissioned Danny to build all the musical instruments they used in that movie. And he also had to make cases for most of them, so he thought that was kind of funny. We have talked about it several times. We don't stay in touch as much as we did, but he's just another guy he was from Louisiana, and he was just another guy. Happened to be in I guess the right place at the right time, but became fairly famous, and a lot of people still know him. We have several apprentices, older apprentices, that have shops all over the country.
Oh wow!
So that's a good feeling to know that they're carrying on the business.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
What do you feel like when one of your students, makes their first, like they make their own signature instrument?
Well, it gives you a good feeling. I'm glad to know that I've been able to help somebody.
Yeah.
And I've always gotten a lot of enjoyment out of that. It's good to see people carrying on the business.
I can imagine it kind of feels like watching your kids grow up.
Yeah,
in a way.
almost. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's funny because my kids are just now where they're young adults.
Yeah.
And they're starting to go out in the world and do their things. And I remember when they were little, and even though apprentices, they're not kids and not babies.
Yeah.
But when they first come into the apprenticeship, like I know with me with the electrical, I had no idea like what I was getting into with the electrical. I had no earthly idea, and I'm still there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But to see the younger apprentices come up behind me, and see the same kind of thing, like you're like, wow, So I imagine with you with the program, and then
Yeah, and with our apprenticeship program, we were more like the old world apprenticeship programs. Our apprentices didn't actually move in and live with us as part of a family, but they were almost that close. And I mean, we would have them out to supper at the house, a couple of times a month. A lot of extracurricular activities that went on, they would be involved in that. So they were more. It was more than just an 8-hour-a-day school. They did actually almost become part of the family, and I enjoyed doing it that way because it kept you a lot closer, and I felt like you could teach somebody a lot better if you were closer to them like that, more like I guess a father-son relationship than a teacher-pupil
Right.
type thing.
That I feel like that's really interesting because when you're sharing that, because you talked about earlier about you have to have that desire.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody's going to stop you from doing what you want if you've got that desire. When you were getting your students, because I'm sure you had a bunch of people come to you.
Yeah.
But when you chose your students, did you look for those kind of qualities
Yeah, to some extent.
Did you ever have anybody that you were like, I'm going to give them a chance, and they turned out that they actually kind of, were able to do everything and made it through?
We had a few of them like that.
No names. I'm just saying. I was just wondering because some people, I feel like when they get into stuff, like with our program, I think we started off with like almost 30 people,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're in our 5th year. We have 14 left,
Right.
which is still a big group.
Yeah.
But out of 30, we had a lot of people, and most of them dropped off before Christmas the first year.
Right.
They just, they're not.
Yeah.
They weren't. Nothing against them, but the work wasn't for them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and it's the same way in this business, but also besides being able to do the work and having the drive to learn and to do the work, we also have to find people that the personalities match.
Yeah.
So it's more like a family than it is a classroom setting, because you'll run into people that just can't get along with other people, and so we were very cognizant of that, because in Nashville we had 8 full-time repairmen.
Oh wow!
And you bring in an apprentice that's working, right beside all of those people, and the apprentice was, they helped whoever needed help. If you needed an extra hand for something, and a lot of times you do, the apprentice was expected to help whoever was there. So you didn't have if you had somebody that had a personality problem, that came to the surface fairly quickly, and we usually would just,
it just
excuse them from the course.
Yeah, we've had that too, where they couldn't do the work or they couldn't get along with folks.
Yeah. That was one of the main things with us was, you had to be able to do the work.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of people out there that are capable of doing the work, but the personality thing was the big thing, and you had to be able to get along. You have to get along with your customers,
Right.
the people that you're going to be working for, and musicians are a breed apart from your average everyday person. They have personality requirements and things that the normal person don't usually have.
I noticed that with engineers and anybody who's like highly analytical, they're not that it's a bad thing, but they're usually very particular, and they want it a certain way, not a deviation.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because, you know, if you're talking about, you know, your music is your music, and or your instrument or whatever, you know, that you're taking care of, you know, a subtle change can change the way the whole instrument sounds. You know, so I think I can appreciate that. You know, that's one of the things that I feel like I've learned through the apprenticeship is that, you know, I was used to being in management and leadership, and then having to, you know, humble myself and be an apprentice.
Yeah.
You know, it's a different world. You know, and then some people, you know, some people some of the journeymen you work with, they don't really want to work with apprentices. Others, they want to overwork the apprentices. You know, because they'd rather have somebody else do the work. But you know, I love it when I get with a good journeyman who is, you know, there's a balance. Like, you know, you get along, you work really well together, you just, you know, hitting on all cylinders, and, you know, when you get that combination, you know, you can get a lot done.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool that, you know, talking to, like, I wouldn't have even had the same perspective when I first met you because I'd never done an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
You know, now going through this apprenticeship, I can really, you know, kind of, even though it's a different trade,
Right.
you know, I can appreciate it more because, you know, the shop guys, you know, if you had 8 repairmen in a shop, I mean, that's, you probably were, you know, jam up with work.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because, I mean, with us, if we had 8 journeymen on our crew, we probably have an apprentice for each one. That'd be 16 people on the crew.
Yeah.
We'd have so much work, I mean, wouldn't even know what to do.
Yeah, we were always blessed with almost more work than we could do, simply because, you know, during that period of time, we were one of the few repair shops in the country, not just in Nashville, we were the only repair shop in Nashville for several years. But we took in work from all over the world. I mean, people would be coming in. Japan was one of our big customers. We probably 25-30% of our business came from Japan.
Wow. That's when you'd have to ship it.
Right.
You know, I still ship stuff today, but I mean, it wasn't like the internet and all that.
It was much easier back then, and amazingly, and it still, you know, what kind of boggles my mind. Probably percentage-wise, probably 20, 25, maybe even 30% of the business we got from Japan, the people would deliver it. They would bring it over and then come back and get it.
Like they would travel from Japan to here?
Yeah.
Wow.
I had several people that would fly in. They would find out, you know, make sure of the time and all.
Yeah.
They would fly in, spend 30 minutes at our business, go back to the airport and fly back to Japan.
Really?
It was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible. I mean, like, that's kind of unheard of almost.
Yeah. But in
That's
most
amazing.
cases, there, you know, we're talking fairly expensive instruments,
Yeah.
and they just
They don't want
they just
anybody
didn't
in there.
want to ship them. They would fly with them, you know, buy an extra seat for them,
Yeah.
and fly with them. It was not that unusual.
Wow. Well, again, it goes back to, like, you know, this is your business. This is
Yeah.
what you're doing. If you're a musician and that's your instrument,
Mhm.
you know, you want the best treatment. You want the best quality that you can get. That's one of the things I think was really neat too with the book, that you started off with the mindset of giving people their money's worth.
Yeah.
For the repairs that you were doing, and then that word of mouth grew into, you know, into this, you know.
Yeah. Well, we never, you know, I've never had any money. Grew up very poor. My dad, for the biggest part of my life, early life, was a sharecropper, and I never even given any thought about being rich. I don't know what I would have done with it if I'd have been rich.
Right.
So we didn't look at, as long as we were making a living and paying the bills, then we were pretty much content.
Mm-hmm.
And we're probably still by most standards, we're probably still one of the least expensive shops in the country. People a lot of times don't believe that. I've got good friends that get instruments repaired at other shops because they feel like, they think that we would be too expensive for them. And of course, they generally find out we would have done it for, a half to 2/3 of what they really paid for it.
Yeah.
But it's just human nature.
Yeah.
But we're probably, if you compare prices, we're probably 20-30% below most of the other shops in the country.
And then the quality of the work. I mean, because price is for me. I think with like in sales and stuff like that, price is always a factor.
Yeah.
Right. But I look at it like, okay, what do I want to do? What am I trying to do?
Right.
And I don't mind paying a little bit extra if I know that I'm going to get what I want.
Right.
It's like eating a ribeye versus a New York strip steak.
Yeah.
You might pay a little bit more for a prime rib or something like that versus, ground round.
Yeah.
But you're going to get a better quality steak.
Right. And it goes back to the old saying, you get what you pay for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's true. It still holds true, and it will always be true, because quality does cost more money.
Yeah. And I think it's neat that you do the repairs, and you have that, you do it, and you have always done it, and that there are other people that earlier you were talking about it, but there are other people that they don't do repairs. But I like the analogy you made, like a good repairman can build a guitar versus not every builder can repair a guitar.
Right.
And I think that it says a lot about the work, just doing the work, and giving people giving them more than what they expect.
Yeah.
And doing right by people.
Yeah.
And I think that's I feel like that's important. I feel like you've always been good to me and my family, and especially when Sebastian first started getting into music and all. I thought that was so cool, and then the kids that come up, like Michael and Boney, she's been on my show several times, and she was another person, another young person that's come up, and
Yeah, she's an unusual and unique talent.
Yeah, definitely.
She's something else.
I think it's interesting because I see that, and like you said earlier about being able to size up, and if you already kind of know what somebody's going to be about when they first get, you get to know them a little bit or whatever. Some people, after a while they'll show you different, but I feel like the same thing. Like you get a good vibe on somebody, and you just extend that, and I think that's the same thing. Like we're talking about customers, and this going back to what you said earlier about things have changed a lot, and we're more kind of like a lazier society or whatever. We're also used to just throw away stuff.
Yeah.
We're not used to being able to buy a guitar that's going to be a lifetime instrument.
Yeah.
People are used to paying. They might go buy a $99 off of a website.
Yeah.
And they might look at like one of your guitars with the inlay and say, "Oh, I could never afford that." It's like, well, you can if you put your mind to it, and that's what you want.
Right.
But when they buy an instrument from you, that's a lifetime instrument.
Yeah.
That's a
In most
generational
cases,
instrument. That people can pass on to their kin or whatever. And I think that when I was a kid growing up, people used to talk about American ingenuity and American craftsmanship and American know-how. You don't hear a lot of that anymore.
Yeah, that's such a shame. People should still be proud of stuff made in the USA. I know that used to be, you look for that stamp on anything that you bought.
Well, as a tradesperson, I'm in the local 508 union, and I try to buy American made when I can and available. My tools, 99% of my tools are American made, and I think people, and I would like to ask you about this, but this is when you support a person that's making that trade, or you're buying a U.S. made product. They're not just supporting like that tool that they're buying or that company. They're supporting the person that's behind behind the strings, behind the guitar.
Yeah.
Because it's not just you here.
Right.
You know, you have all these other people that, you know, that they work for you, or they work with you, or they, you know, they depend on you for their, you know, like, hey Randy, I'm sure you've had people call, hey Randy, I've got a problem with my guitar, I've got a gig this weekend, and you know.
Yeah, we run into that weekly.
Yeah. So could you talk about that that craftsmanship, because, you know, it's easier to go online and say, hey, I'm going to buy $100 guitar versus looking at, you know, a Randy Wood guitar as an investment. Can you talk a little bit about that too? And the craftsmanship and all?
Well, like I say, you know, the old saying, you get what you pay for, and the instruments that are handmade, not just my instruments, but
Right.
almost anybody that builds, it's like getting a car that's handmade. And there's still a few of them around, most of them in Europe. But the workmanship, the people doing the work pay a lot more attention to detail than somebody in a factory, whereas in a manufacturing setting, they teach a person to do one little job, and that's all they know. In a setting like mine, I do all the work, no matter what it is, from you know, picking up the raw lumber to cutting it down to size to, you know, everything. And people working in the manufacturing setting, they know one little job. They may, well, I build automobiles, but they put 2 screws into a
Right.
door or something, and they do it 8 hours a day, which
Right.
is very mundane. And you almost see where people can't take or can't take a lot of pride in what they're doing nowadays. That's one of the big problems with the manufacturing process in the United States, is people don't, no matter what their job is, they should take pride in it. And
Yeah.
a lot of them are so mundane that you almost can't take any pride in it. It's just something that you do to get a paycheck.
There's not a finished product that you can look at.
Right.
And
So besides when you buy a custom-made instrument, besides getting a lot better quality workmanship and all, you also get the reputation and everything of the person behind all that, and the amount of time and effort that they put into getting something just right, as opposed to somebody just sticking something together.
Yeah, I like to look at it too, like you said, when they're doing a job and they might be doing the same task over and over and over again repeatedly, versus you're taking the raw materials and you know, anybody that does an honest day's worth of work, I have respect for. You know what I mean? And when it comes to that craftsmanship or artistry, or, you know, like that old school guild, you know, where you learn
Right.
to make something that people, with the intention of somebody else to use.
Yeah.
You know, I love the idea that you build it as something like they used to build. You buy it, it had a lifetime warranty on it.
Right.
If something were wrong because of a manufacturer defect, they would take care of it, no problem.
Yeah.
You know, and the idea was you paid more because the idea was that you're paying for that craftsmanship, you're paying for
Right.
the better quality materials, you know, you're paying for, you know, those things that went into building that that tool or that instrument or whatever, and you could depend on it lasting a long time.
Sure. Right.
You know, you could depend on it being built to last, you know, and I mean, that's not just a catchphrase, I mean, but that, you know, I know today it seems like everything's a throwaway thing. You know, when you buy stuff at the store, you don't expect it, like even the phone that we're recording this on, you know, 2 to 3 years, you know, and you pay $1,000 for a phone, you know, easily, and then you pay for a monthly service. And, you know, so when I look at, you know, the instruments that you build, because you have a wide range. You have the top of the line of the industry, you know, that you can't really get any better.
Mhm.
To you also have the entry level.
Yeah.
You know, for maybe students or amateurs that are wanting to get into it, and so I think that's the difference between what we have still here in the U.S. Still in the the world, we still have people that are craftsmanship, doing crafts work, versus just we're so conditioned to buying just throwaway stuff.
Yeah.
And
that's such a shame.
yeah, but I love that there are people, like you said, you have these students that went through your apprenticeship, that they have their own schools.
Mhm.
They're carrying that that legacy or that tradition
Yeah.
on, and I feel like that there's less people doing that. Like even with our trade, the electrical business, there are a lot of electricians out there.
Mm-hmm.
There are not as many trade electricians, like local union electricians.
Right. Yeah.
And we do a different kind of work than like I do heavy industrial electrical work.
Sure.
And it's almost the same thing, like you said earlier. If you could do one thing, you could do all the rest. But
Yeah.
sometimes if you could do the other thing, you can't do the rest.
Yeah.
And that's something I've really liked. I imagine too with you started off doing these repairs, and
Mhm.
you're playing music and all that, and then
Yeah.
you saw an opportunity, like, hey, this is what people like when you went from building guitars, you're like, everybody's building a guitar, I can't build it for less than what they're buying them for. I'm going to build a mandolin.
Yeah.
Thinking differently.
Mhm.
People talk about thinking outside the box, but I feel like that is something that we can do. We can go back and say, hey, we're going to provide craftsmanship.
Yeah.
It's going to cost a little more because the materials are better quality, the labor. How many hours on average would you put into a guitar building one?
Yeah. Well, my basic guitar, we'll have 120 hours in one.
And a manufacturer might be
A couple of hours.
a couple hours, right?
Yeah.
And they're off the line. Versus, you spending, like we're talking about if it's 120 to 150 hours, that's almost 4 weeks worth of time
Yeah. Mhm.
with one instrument.
Right.
I think that's what separates the quality and the
Mhm.
the lifetime of
Oh, yeah.
enjoyment that people can have from an instrument that you build. So,
Mhm.
I really appreciate you doing this interview.
Yeah.
Let's just wrap it up talking a little bit more about the book.
Mhm.
What was the process like working with Daniel?
Well, it was great. Daniel and I were good friends, and he would, after he decided to try to write a book, he would come over. I do most of my work at night because during the day I'm tied up with phones and customers, and
interviews,
things. And so I do a lot of work at night. But he would come over at night and hang out in the shop and just turn on his he had a little recorder. He would just turn that on and record the whole evening, and we'd be talking about different things. So he learned a lot from that, and then he actually would get out and go look up people that knew me. He went to California, went to Boston, I think Chicago, Nashville, several places, and interviewed people that I had worked with.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to me.
Kind of like, hey, I'll just work on this.
Yeah, he did his homework. He got
Yeah.
out. And he didn't just write about stuff that he had learned while he was hanging out here.
I love that it says Daniel Wile is written for Bluegrass Unlimited, Vintage Guitar, the Bluegrass Standard. He's the president of the Southern Cast Products, a steel foundry in Meridian, Mississippi.
Right.
Talking about trades and
He's also a licensed pilot.
Oh wow.
Flies his own plane. He's an aeronautical engineer. He's had many accomplishments of his
That's
own.
really interesting.
Very interesting individual.
I'll have to get in touch with him and have do an interview with him too.
There you go.
That's great. Well, thank you, Randy,
Yeah.
so much for doing this interview today. I really appreciate it.